Hello, and welcome once again to Friday Focus, where we do not focus on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Today, Friday Focus is continuing its study on or from the Sermon on the Mount, and we're going to be looking at an interesting topic called treasure. All over the world, people are hunting treasure. They dive under the sea to retrieve chests of gold, silver, and precious jewels. Others scour the land with metal detectors to look for valuables. There are archaeologists out there that seek ancient tombs looking for artifacts thousands of years old. There have been movies made about it. Clues have been examined. Expeditions have been mounted, all revolving around that one word, treasure. Did you know that Jesus talked about treasure? Are you aware that you can have treasure in heaven? Look at what Jesus said. He said this: "Don't store up treasures here on earth where moths eat them and rust destroys them, and where thieves break in and steal. Store your treasure in heaven, where moths and rust cannot destroy and thieves do not break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. Your eye is a lamp that provides light for your body, and when your eye is good, your whole body is filled with light. But when your eye is bad, your whole body is filled with darkness. And if the light you think you have is actually darkness, how deep that darkness is. No one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." It comes from Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 24. Now, notice he starts out talking about treasure, and then he uses an illustration of the eye and light to teach about misplaced priorities. And he finishes up talking about money. Now, if you're more concerned about earthly things than your relationship with the Lord, you're going to miss the mark. Why? Because Jesus is addressing heart issues. Notice he keeps coming back to the heart. Perhaps a verse from the prophet Jeremiah explains the reason. What does Jeremiah say? Well, in chapter 17, verse 9, he says, "The human heart is the most deceitful of all things and desperately wicked. Who really knows how bad it is?" Jesus warns his audience, and by extension, those of us here in the 21st century, that we need to prioritize our focus from the temporal to that which is eternal. He stresses this eternal perspective later in Matthew when he says, "And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul?" Matthew 16:26. We must focus on the right things which can lead to excellence. If our attention is fixated on ourselves and what we want, we become quite narcissistic, expending all our energy on earthly pursuits. Now, such a pursuit is not necessarily wrong or bad, except when it becomes the sum total of our everyday lives. Paul gives insight into what it's like to focus on an eternal perspective. The Message easily clarifies it for us. This is what he said: "So, here's what I want you to do. God helping you take your everyday life, your ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for Him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. Readily recognize what He wants from you and quickly respond to it. Unlike the culture around you, always dragging you down to its level of immaturity, God brings the best out of you. He develops well-formed maturity in you. That's Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Did you see some things that might apply to you in your life? Sometimes we find we're pretty well adjusted to the culture around us, don't we? So, as we read this verse, do you see it? Our earthly focus versus an eternal focus. Living today, yet preparing for a life to come. Unlike the scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees' lifestyle, Jesus told his listeners that there was a better focus, one that would lay up treasure, the things laid up in a treasury, collected treasures, personal valuables, that stuff that we consider treasure. It's okay to want to own nice things. Jesus teaches, don't let those things own us. Are you familiar with the term expiry date? These verses in Matthew are both a warning and an encouragement. Well, how so, you might ask? Well, first of all, we all have an expiry date. Everybody without exception will die and leave behind everything we have worked so hard to amass. We take absolutely nothing with us. And then number two, it's an encouragement in that Jesus tells us that even though we leave it all behind, we can send things of value on ahead of us, things that will be important from an eternal perspective. Perhaps a couple of verses from a poem by a fellow by the name of C.T. Studd, who was a British missionary serving the Lord in China, India, and Africa. He says it best. Two little lines I heard one day, traveling along life's busy way, bringing conviction to my heart, and from my mind would not depart. Only one life, 'twill soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. Only one life, yes, only one. Soon will its fleeting hours be done, then in that day my Lord to meet and stand before his judgment seat. Only one life, 'twill soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. Because Jesus knew how fleeting life is, he encouraged everyone within earshot to check their heart attitude. If we are sold out to money and the things it obtains, then we have an issue. As he says in Matthew chapter 6, verse 24, no one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Our heart's attitude is critical when it comes to serving God. Do you recall what I said about the heart in Jeremiah 17:9 a few sentences ago? Well, maybe we should check out the next verse, verse 10. It says this, but I, the Lord, search all hearts and examine secret motives. So if you think you're getting away with something, I have news for you. You're not. I, the Lord, search all hearts and examine secret motives. I give all people their due rewards according to what their actions deserve. Jeremiah 17:10. I think the only thing I could say that would sum up all we've talked about today is this. Maybe it's time to refocus our focus. This is Dr. Vic Hollyfriend in His Grace. If you have any comments or questions, you can email them to me at vicsfridayfocus@gmail.com. God bless you and have a terrific week.